In this video, we're going to look at my work-in-progress prototype, which thus far has been created without using any custom scripts. My core goal for this game is creating an old-school, narrative-heavy experience. Use simple mechanics and keep it easy to pick up, and keep the focus on managing your resources and making every decision matter. Last but not least, I also want to keep it very replayable with a lot of random elements. So in essence, this is really a game about the journey. And for demo purposes, I've recycled some assets from games like the Banner Saga, Darkest Dungeons, and some of my old art assets to help speed up some of the prototyping. This also minimizes some of the throwaway art and helps me present the prototype a little bit easier. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're looking at this. So what we're looking at here is a map of the game. And again, this is a game about the journey. You can see here to get started, I can select this icon on the map to start moving towards my first village. I also have an icon up here for resources. So before we jump into the map, let's go ahead and pull up some resources. And again, bear in mind, this is all very much a work in progress, and I am using a lot of placeholder art here. So there's a variety of resources that I can look at. Things like my reputation. And again, this is pulling in some random elements, including things like my name, what god I'm following, what country I'm from, and other things like that. I can also look at my livestock, which is another very important resource. The amount of gold that I have, the amount of grain, the number of warriors that I have, the people's faith that are following me, slaves or thralls that I may have captured along the way, and last but not least, the morale of the camp. Now, when I make a selection on the map, you can see here in the lower left-hand corner that the journey begins, and along the way, random events will populate. Now, this event that's happening here is actually not random. That's one of the next steps that we need to develop out on the game. And currently right now, there are some random elements to this. So, for example, the name of the village has been randomized, but the actual event is not. You can see here there's also dialogue that can happen. So here's my advisor. They've come to me to let me know that we found a family of travelers on the roadside. They're tired and hungry, and their father claims that they will starve if we don't aid them. So this is just a really simple rudimentary example of a very basic event. The events can actually be very complex, where they can have lots of decisions that are happening and lots of events and triggers that are getting saved. So now it's presented me with a decision. I can choose to give the family food and send them on their way. I can tell them that only those who follow the prophet will be fed, or I can make them work for their food as thralls for the camp. Now, all of these options here actually do impact my resources and the way people are going to view me based on that. So just for demo purposes, I'll just give the family some food and send them on their way. They're obviously very grateful for that. And now my advisor is telling me that the people are really happy with the decision that I made. So even though I lost a little bit of my food resources, I've made the people happy. You can see now the journey's continued onward, and as we get closer to the village, we can also trigger things like some basic animations that will show up. Here I'm actually using some art from an old project of mine, so this will all eventually get replaced. But again, this is just a rudimentary example of how you can spice a lot of this stuff up with some, banner style type animations here to show that journey as we're getting a little bit closer. Again, this is pretty text heavy and relying a bit more on a tutorial at this point to sort of tell me that I'm approaching a village. And again, a lot of this is really just placeholder at this point. So now I've made it to the village, and right now I'm just displaying this as an actual menu, but the final piece will actually show quite a bit of actual village artwork, and you'll be able to go into various buildings, sort of similar to what you would experience in Darkest Dungeon when you go back to the main town. Now, obviously, one of the core mechanics in the game too is that on your journey, you're being chased by this plague that's sort of sweeping over the land. So you can't stay in anywhere very long. So you can see right now, I only have 2 action points, and there's a variety of things that I can do in this village. I can be resting the people, so if they're tired, now, I'll obviously be using up some of my resources the longer I stay here, but it can make the people happy if they're starting to turn sour on me. I could raid the village. This is currently a work in progress feature, but I'll be covering this in one of my next videos that's getting worked on right now. I can trade with them. try to recruit more followers, or I can give gifts to these people, or I can just continue on my way. But it's definitely best to try to do something while you're in these villages along the way. Let's go ahead and trade with them. Again, this is a work in progress feature, but it's using a lot of variable elements here where it recognizes decisions that we've made up to this point. So for example, if I have a poor reputation with these people or a good reputation, that could obviously impact some of the results that I'm seeing here. Right now, I also only have it set up to trade, but eventually I'm going to add more features as well where I can also just buy and sell without needing to physically trade goods. But let's go ahead and do some trades for now. So this is also random as well. So it's telling me that they have more warriors and villagers than they can feed right now at this particular village. So that's going to dictate and drive a lot of the options that are available to me. And again, this is randomized right now. Sometimes they may be more in need of food or other things. So again, these are just more examples where I can be selling bushels of grain, or I can get some slaves or warriors, or maybe I'm trying to buy livestock, or maybe I just don't find any deals here at this time. So just for demo purposes, I'm going to sell 5 bushels of grains for some thralls. And again, that's just because they have more mouths to feed than they can afford this winter. So we give them 5 bushels of grain and they give us 40 slaves back. And we'll be covering more of this in other details. So I've completed that transaction. You can see now I only have 1 action point left. So maybe I also want to try to recruit some of these people. So again, more random elements here. This is the god that I've selected at the beginning of the game. So that's who I am following right now. And if I decide that I want to try to recruit them, this is just a confirmation here. It's going to ask me how I would like to try to recruit followers. So right now, in this case, I have 3 examples. I can tell them about the great death that's coming. I can tell them about the god that I'm following, or I can tell them about myself. And again, these elements will all be tied to decisions that I've made up to this point. And the results that I get are going to be very contingent on what I'm doing. So, does the village know? Are they aware of the Great Death? Has it become a relevant part of the map? Do they know of my god? Do they follow my god already? And, do I have enough reputation for them to be following me? And then based on that selection, that's going to drive the results that I get. So if I warn them, I'm going to tell them about the plague that's coming. But basically right now what I'm finding out is that people are confused because I just started out the game. So the plague isn't even on the map at this point. So for the most part, I've really just confused people and they kind of think that I'm a bit of a madman here. Now it looks like though I've gotten lucky and a handful of them have come forward to ask, what can we do to avoid the plague? So I'm telling them that they should be following the prophet and will lead them on their way to safety. And I got very lucky here, and a handful of villagers did go ahead and join our cause. So we actually got about 10 more villagers that have joined up. But at this point, I've used up all of my action points in the village, and the advisor is telling me that we really need to keep going. So we will go ahead and keep moving forward on our journey. So we're back to our map. You can see now the path is starting to divide off. And depending on where we're going, this path is going to diverge, and I can pick and choose to head to various types of places, whether it's cities or villages or other caravans. And again, you can see the journey continues on and other events may start to populate. I can also go to my resources though and start seeing the impacts that I've made from my decisions. So for example, if I go to my livestock, remember we had that event where I gave that family a livestock and some grain. So it's actually used up some of those resources now and it's telling me that. And again, this is very text heavy, but it's really trying to give that impression that your advisor is sort of telling you about the resources that you have, rather than looking at sort of scales and numbers of all of your resources. And again, I can just go through and check to see how the impact is of stuff that I've done. So I can see now that I actually have some slaves, which I did not have before. And I can see actually the morale of the people has gone up quite a bit because they were really happy with a lot of the decisions that I've made thus far. So thank you so much for watching. This was just a very brief little snapshot of a very much work in progress prototype. If you'd like to keep following along with the development, go ahead and like, comment, or subscribe to the video. Thanks for watching.